So our session's beginning now.
Good.
And I would like to get a brief introduction from everyone. I might introduce myself. I'm Hank Levin, and I was the editor.
Haven't we all heard each other before?
No, we haven't. Not all of us. So I don't want to go through all of the people that everyone's familiar with necessarily, but
Right.
I'll say I was the editor of the Free Spirit Journal for a number of years, and I've written some books on clearing, and I manufacture some meters and the inner track, and I've taken over the trying to convert the Free Spirit Journal to Facebook, which is very difficult, but we do have some activities here with the Free Spirit Journal community portal. We have a discussion group, and this is what I'm doing right now. And David, you are in Canada,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
And where again?
Near Toronto.
Near Toronto. Excellent.
Yeah, an hour west of Toronto.
Okay.
Oh.
And yes.
I'm 3 hours from Detroit and an hour and a half or 3/4 from Niagara Falls.
Wonderful. And Norma is
Queen of the castle.
Queen of the castle, and
yeah, right.
and she's a graphic designer.
Yep.
And she is a consulting psychic. She's an intuitive consultant, and should we say healer, or do you like that?
Sure. Yeah, healer is good.
Okay.
Anything.
And Roger is I guess you could be called an old timer now at this point, right?
Yeah, ancient.
One of the old stalwarts.
Oh.
And you have a background in not only the Big S, but in Alan Walters' work,
Knowledgeism.
and knowledgeism, and you've done other things as well.
Yeah.
And that is just wonderful. And you live in New York, right?
Yeah, Manhattan.
Manhattan.
Yeah.
And Robert, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I graduated. No, I didn't. I didn't get my goldenrod, so I didn't graduate. A friend of mine took me into Scientology, Sherman Oaks Mission in 1976.
Mm-hmm.
And so I studied that stuff until I used it in my business, was extremely helpful. I did not train to be an auditor. I was mainly learning things that would help me deal with people and communicate properly and expand my business.
Mm-hmm.
So I was more into the admin tech. Then things, and then I ended up working with Robbie Keynes, who was outside of the, who was with the church at the time, but he was an outside auditor, and I did a lot of ethics counseling with him.
Mm-hmm.
Then things went sideways at the church, and I left, and ended up working with another fellow, Dale Greenwood, from about 88 to mid 90s, when 95. Well, actually, I still work with him. 95 was when I went down to Texas for knowledgeism.
Oh, so you've done the knowledgeism also. I don't want to get a thorough timeline, because that as you can understand, it takes.
I'm done.
Oh, fantastic! And you're with us. Wonderful. Thank you. And Mick, can you tell us a little about yourself?
Sure. I'm in Honolulu.
Yes.
And so I'm familiar a little bit with the organization from 20 years ago in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
And didn't last very long because my other practices were not welcomed. So that was the extent of that.
What were your other practices?
New Age interests.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I noticed.
Meditation was a big one.
Yeah.
That's very valuable.
Sure.
I thought so.
Yeah.
So I kept that, and I let the other go.
Well, interesting about meditation is the difference between prayer and meditation. And prayer, they say, prayer is when you talk to God. Meditation is when you listen.
Yeah, I heard,
Yeah.
I heard that
And,
before, yeah.
and it's an eminently spiritual activity. And I grew up in a very religious a Jewish family, and they consider themselves very religious, but I consider they were not spiritual because they never listened. They didn't even listen to themselves, to each other at the table. I mean,
Right.
everybody talked. So you were encouraged to pray to God. And I can just see God sitting there saying, you know, enough from you already, you know.
So what kind of what branch of meditation did you follow?
Several different disciplines, from esoteric schools here and there across the country. Um, you name it, I've done it, I guess.
Uh-huh. Very good. I noticed you recently got you seem to be working now with Peter Shepard's material.
I had the material for several years.
Mhm.
Just beginning to work with it again.
Great. Well, I wish you luck with that. Yeah, Peter's an old friend, and he's done a lot of writing, and he has a lot of integrity.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, and Peter
Yeah.
Shepard. Yeah, Transfer Mind. Um, he's an old scholar. He knows a lot of stuff, and so anyhow, I think we've got our introductions taken care of, and the subject today is going to be being on purpose. And I think a lot of us cringe when we hear about being on purpose because we were given a purpose.
True.
Your purpose was to clear the planet, or you know, something like that. Uh, what made this uncomfortable was that somebody else was giving us our purpose.
Yeah.
And it might coincide, of course, the concept of clear. If you attended that last meeting where we talked about the state of clear, uh, it's very vague, to say the least. And if somebody gives you a purpose that's vague, you engage it with all of your energy, and what have you got? And I pretty much dismissed that idea of being on purpose. There was one point at which, you know, I've always been rather impecunious, and I've never made a lot of money at one point, but there was a point where I decided to pay for services. And I made an amazing amount of money in a very short amount of time. And I assume this had something to do with being on purpose. And it was indeed that indoctrinated purpose, but of course that did not last. And so I bollocksed around looking for a purpose for a long time. I was haunted ever since I was in college. I remember standing outside looking at the stars, screaming, "What am I doing here? You know, why did you put me here? What do you want from me?" Because I was not having fun. I,
I did similar.
yeah, I grew up miserably, and I was willing to put up with all kinds of travail if I knew what the purpose was. And kind of went from there. And one thing that seemed to be easy for me was building musical instruments, crafts. I've been building model airplanes and stuff like that since I was a child. It's my briar patch. It's what I do. I don't have to change who I am to do that. I don't have to learn to be outgoing, and I have a knack for it. I can look at something like a guitar or a lute, and I can tell what's wrong with it. I can kind of pick up the design intention and go in there and fix it. And one day I was sitting in my shop in New York. I had a shop called House of Musical Traditions, and it was a world music emporium. We sold instruments from all over the world, sitars, tabla, lutes, instruments from the Renaissance in Europe. And I was sitting there working on something, and an employee in the front of the shop turned on a particular piece of music. And I looked up, and the shop was on St. Mark's Place in New York, ground level, and you look out the window, and there are people walking by on the street on St. Mark's Place, very typically New York. But I looked up, and out the window, it wasn't New York. It was a dirt road, and there were musical instruments hanging in the window, which I never had. And there were like bullocks, you know, people had beasts of burden walking up and down on this road, and I was listening to this music. If you know, it was Indian Chennai music, Bismillah Khan, and it occurred to me, you know, you've been doing this for way too long. It was so real. It was so clear. It was nothing that I've ever seen before in this lifetime, but it was like, you know, I saw the instruments. I could kind of tell where they were from. They were from like east of Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, that kind of instruments. And here I'm sitting there working on a piece of ivory in New York for an Indian instrument, and I'm looking up, and there are all these instruments in my window. Too long, you know. So what am I doing here? And well, I'll come back to that in a second. There's something that I wanted to share with you. I read this at a certain point. I think I can share this without messing things up too badly. I'll read this to you. This was in a book that I'd gotten about Jalaluddin al-Rumi. He was a poet and philosopher. He was born in Afghanistan, Balkh, Afghanistan, and his father was a famous educator. And this was around 700 AD, and they fled to what is now Anatolia to get away from the Mongols. And this boy who came to Anatolia with his father started a university in Konya. And if you've ever heard of the whirling dervishes, these were the people who started that particular sect or cult. There's something that Jalaluddin al-Rumi read. He's one of the foremost poets and philosophers in the world. Everybody in India, Afghanistan, Persia, Turkey, Arabia, everybody knows who Jalaluddin al-Rumi was. And he said, there is one thing in this world which you must never forget to do. If you forget everything else and not this, there is nothing to worry about. But if you remember everything else and forget this, then you will have done nothing in your life. It's as if a king has sent you to some country to do a task, and you perform 100 other services, but not the one he sent you to do. So human beings come to this world to do particular work. That work is the purpose. And each is specific to the person. If you don't do it, it's as though a knife of the finest tempering were nailed into a wall to hang things on. For a penny, an iron nail could be bought to serve for that. Remember the deep root of your being, the presence of your Lord. Give your life to the one who already owns your breath and your moments. If you don't, you will be like the one who takes a precious dagger and hammers it into his kitchen wall for a peg to hold his dipper gourd. You will be wasting valuable keenness and foolishly ignoring your dignity and your purpose.
That's quite poetic.
Oh, yeah.
Uh,
So this was Rumi, and this was a translation from Coleman Barks. It's been translated by a number of people. Barks's book is called The Essential Rumi, and you can get this on Amazon very cheaply. So let me get back to Zoom here.
So it begs the question, if you don't know what that is, how do you find it?
That's a very good question. By the way, what I'm going to take this, and I should have had this already. I'm going to copy this and paste it into the
Into the chat.
into the chat.
Hank, why don't you put it in the Free Spirit Portal Facebook page?
Excellent. That's a good idea. Will that work for everybody? Because
in there.
because I am having trouble finding, once you decide to share a file in the meeting,
It opens a dialog box, and then you got to go find it.
then you got to go find it, and I'm having trouble finding it.
Yeah, but why don't we
That's
postpone that and just do it after the discussion?
Okay, that's just fine. Just a little bit more on my experience with purpose. When I lived in San Rafael, California, I started to get interested in the Michael materials, which is it's a cosmology which is channeled, and I became acquainted. Yeah, I became acquainted with a person who worked with this professionally, and I became interested in automatic writing. So I would turn the light on my computer down and just type. So I couldn't actually see what I was typing. And I would, I typed something, and later on I looked at it and I read it, and I saw what I had typed was purpose, the empowerment of people according to their receptivity. And I didn't know what the hell that meant. And I'm goofing. It's like playing these card tricks and stuff. And so I copied that down, and I didn't really look at it for 2 years. And when I did look at it, I realized this is my life's purpose. This is my purpose. Is the empowerment of people. But it's not just the empowerment of people. That would be too mamby-pamby. According to their receptivity. And that's a challenge for me. See, that's a personal challenge. because I'm the proverbial Boy Scout that helps the old lady across the street when she doesn't want to go.
There's a saying I learned from somebody here a while ago: speak to those only nearby who will want to listen, and then those from far away will come.
Oh, I
That's
love that. That's great.
that's a good formula. That's good. So that is my experience with purpose, and I've always admired people that seemed to manifest a purpose, and I always had this feeling that their life was successful, even if that person was sick or a little crazy. You know, we talked about the importance of the state of clear. And the idea of being on purpose to me seemed, personally for myself, more important than being totally sane or totally together. You know, sanity is an ephemeral thing. You're like an athlete. You get older, you get to the point where you're, hey Tom, you get to the point where you are much smarter than you were when you were younger. You're saner. Hopefully you're more together. And you hit a golden spot in your life, and it's like an athlete. You hit your good years. But then as you get very old, you get older and older, you have more pressure from the body, more disappointments from people, more crap starts coming in, more things to handle, and you're not going to be as sane as long as you've got this body. You know, the best you can do is become a nice, personable, quiet old man that doesn't say a lot of stupid things and bother people. And then you die. So this
Sounds
is
like a battle to me.
well, this is like a tennis player that can have a career until he's maybe 40 years old, 45 years old. By the time he's 45 years old, he's really old, and he's got to find an alternative to competitive tennis. You see? You can play other old men, but you can't get out there and be, play world class, even if you did before.
I think Roger knows about that one. You know, the Olympic swimming.
Oh yeah, yeah. Have you had thoughts about that as an athlete?
Yeah, comes a time when you begin to shift attention onto what else should I be doing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
luckily, that was around. I'd had Scientology data as my swimming career was coming to an end, so I knew the tech of, like what else to pursue as a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
My own little story on purpose was given to me when I was about 8 years old, when I wanted to be a swimming champion, and I was put in the hands of a coach by my father. And the coach said to me, well, Roger, if you want to be a champion, you've really got to be dedicated to it, and you've really got to be willing to put in the work and do the work, which means train, laps in the pool. And it taught me a big lesson, even at that young age, that you really had to focus your attention on what it is you really wanted to accomplish, whatever it was. For me, it was champion swimmer at the time.
Mm-hmm.
That lesson stuck with me. And so in all the things that I then pursued, whatever it happened to be, it was this laser-like focus of spiritual life force toward what is it I want to attain or accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very empowering for me. The tragedy with the old, being on purpose in the church gig, it was their bloody purpose and nothing else. And it was, everybody was trying to accomplish it in the wrong way and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But if you know what you really want to attain in this life, or from a larger perspective, a cosmological perspective, then you'll win at it. Luckily, I've now found what my cosmological purpose is, and that is I'm an educator.
I see.
I just simply want to spread knowledge and have people enlightened in the way that they'd like to be enlightened.
Ah,
How do you do that?
Well, in my case, I like contacting people and finding out what it is they're interested in and helping them attain it with the knowledge I've got.
Hmm.
And there's all sorts of little wrinkles in all of that. This little piece of tech applies and that little piece of tech applies, and just give them the information that can help them move in the direction or handle what they want to have handled at that time. Now, my whole gig has always been on the positive of, what is it you want to attain, accomplish, be, do, and have, rather than, the gig of what's negative to get rid of. That's a bum stare. That's church current dissemination technique. Find out what's wrong to try and fix it. That's a bottomless pit to nowhere.
hmm
But having the perspective of upgrading conditions toward a more ideal for yourself or for others or even for a group, that's infinite expansion.
Ah. What do you find is the biggest barrier? The thing that you need to overcome to expedite your purpose?
For me, I don't run into a barrier on that. I mean, basically, the only thing that
Oh,
will,
I'm so envious.
will defeat me with some individuals is that they're too negative, too destructive to themselves and their environment, and they just will not maintain a connection so that you can either spiritually, telepathically, or with live communication answer the question of what information do they need in order for them to advance and expand and help themselves.
Well, we're talking about barriers. So for you, there are no barriers, but the barriers are theirs. See,
Yeah, it's in their universe, yeah.
see, I've experienced that a little differently. The very statement of my purpose implies, according to their receptivity,
Right.
implies a certain sensitivity and judgment, which I, by nature, have had to develop.
Yeah.
My chief negative feature has been impatience. So when a person is stupid or obstinate or stubborn, and I feel like I'm wasting my time, it kicks in this impatience thing, and I start to become abrupt and inclined to throw my hands up, and that in order for me to carry out my purpose, I have to be on top of that. I have to handle this impatient thing.
Yeah. Well, don't give yourself any bypass charge on that, Hank.
There's just a fact. It's just something that I had to learn to live with. Some people are very patient. You can tell patient people because when they make an appointment, they always show up on time.
Mm-hmm.
Impatient people are very often late because they cannot assign the appropriate amount of time to everything they need to do that day. And they always stop to answer a phone at the last minute or think of something else they needed to do, and it makes them late. And that's a part of being impatient, and I resemble that. So it's interesting because your purpose, I think for myself, the purpose educates the person because nobody is really here for a smooth ride. This is my own thinking. Maybe maybe it's just sour grapes.
Calm seas do not a good sailor make.
Wow, you've got a
Thank you.
great saying there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have that problem though, Hank. If I find somebody's being obstreperous and stupid, and I say, okay, I'll just leave them with it, and look at the rest of the universe.
But Roger, isn't everybody stupid?
No.
Stupid is the inability to evaluate data.
Yeah, I mean, some people, are deliberately whatever they're doing, and some people are interested in knowledge. Some people are interested in finding out things to help them improve themselves. I mean, Virginia and I paddle through the farmers market here every Saturday morning, and my trick is finding these new people all the time, and cheering them up, and having them feeling better from having met me. Finding out what's going on that interests them. Life's supposed to be enjoyed, mate.
Ah, well, the old man had a wonderful definition for stupidity: the unknownness of consideration.
Yeah.
Well, that's too technical, too complex. I mean,
Too technical, too yeah.
Esoteric. It's esoteric.
Most people, it did not make an impression on. Most people, that is something that most people cannot use.
Yeah.
Well,
But what it means is very simply this. My image for this, my icon for this, is a dog carrying a long stick, trying to get through a fence with a missing slat. And he tries to go through the fence, and the stick bangs on the rest of the fence. He knows that it's open enough for him to get his body through. It doesn't occur to him, if he turned his head sideways and had the stick go up and down, he could get through the fence. So he keeps trying to push through the fence. I mean, at some point, he knows that the slat is too big, too small for the stick, and he's got to know on some level that the stick would go through if it were up straight up and down. Even if it's a dog, he understands that. A wolf would probably understand it immediately, but a dog might sit and take 20 minutes to figure this out. You see, and this is unknownness of consideration.
It was what's his name? Trump guy, the Trump guy, Stevens. Dennis Stevens said, "Intelligence is the ability to evaluate data. Ignorance is the inability to evaluate data, and stupidity is the lack of no. Ignorance is the lack of data to evaluate. Stupidity is the inability to evaluate data, and insanity is the perverted ability to evaluate data."
You could.
I like it.
okay.
You could work with that, I guess. Yeah. Well,
What does everybody else say?
As a counselor or a therapist, it's an advantage to see out points. When you look at an overall picture and you see a place where the walls don't come all the way to the corners, you can use this to ask questions.
Right.
It's if this is the only ability that you have, though, you're a cynic, and you end up being a Jewish comedian. You see outpoints, and you can hold them up to ridicule. You make fun of them, but to see this happening in a person's life.
What's the definition of cynic?
A person who only sees outpoints, who only sees what's wrong in a situation.
Somebody has an aversion to truth.
Well, that's a little vague. A cynic is a person who sees outpoints but doesn't see how it could get better.
Yeah.
Doesn't see the. Yeah. You could say a pessimist. Yeah. A skeptic is a person who doesn't easily believe in things that are good, but can be brought around. A cynic only sees what's bad. You see, so
there's another wrinkle here.
Yes.
Another viewpoint. Where are you going?
I'm sorry, Norma had a message for me.
Okay. I thought you were chasing a fly or something. It's belief.
How so?
Well, I'm sorry, let me rephrase. It's the mechanics of belief. Belief is defined as something that is accepted as true.
Yeah.
The key word in there is accept.
Right.
And in the etymology for accept, it says to take. Now, what happens at that point is the decision. And in the etymology of decision is to cut off.
Ah,
So an example is,
it's like to incise.
I got a rack of DVDs and I want to watch a movie, and so, or a book to read or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm looking at all of them, I'm considering all of them, and then I choose one. At that point, what happens to all the others? They're no longer under consideration.
Mm-hmm.
So if I grow up in a evangelical, Christian, homeschooled, brainwashed house and community, that's it, baby. I can't see outside that box.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's the limit of everything for you, yeah.
So what happens is, in relationship to what you two fellows that was on my screen here, there and there, Roger and Hank were talking about, is when you are available to help someone, but they can't take your help because you're challenging their beliefs. And if their beliefs are that type that I just used an example of, if you break one part of it, the whole system of it comes apart. And that's too much.
It is. It's too much. It's overwhelming.
So it's not necessary. It's an unwillingness. Well, it's not even an unwillingness to look. I mean, you're just done. You ain't looking.
I get an email from or a newsletter every other day or so. The headline the other day was the unexamined faith is not worth living.
No. Unexamined faith. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. That's from Socrates said the unexamined life is not worth living.
Yeah.
The unexamined faith. Mick, what do you think of all of this?
The meditation school I'm involved with currently,
Mm-hmm.
out of Laguna Beach. I'm involved in a 12-week class.
Oh.
It's called Self-Realization course
Mm-hmm.
from the Self-Awareness Institute.
Uh-huh.
And this is week number 3.
This is
And
not Vipassana, is it?
no, it's not.
Uh-huh.
This week's precept is exactly what we're talking about on purpose.
Wow.
What is our life's purpose? So things do fall in line quite synchronistically when you are seeking.
Yes, exactly so. Exactly so.
I didn't quite get that last part. Things fall in line when you're what? What was the last word?
Synchronistically.
When you are
Seeking.
SEEK?
Yes.
Okay. It's my hearing.
Now the promotion that I sent out, the invitation to this meeting, stated that things occur synchronistically when you're on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, if seeking can be a purpose, expansion can be a purpose.
On purpose or moving in that direction is more of the whole story.
Yes. And Tom, what do you think of this?
Well, I got in here late, so I'm just getting everything in right now.
That's okay. The question: what's your purpose?
That's another thing I need to start working on.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Right now, I was just getting sessions and learning everything about it as much as possible.
Well, that's a means to an end.
Yeah.
It's also a seeking purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that might be what I'm doing, seeking my purpose.
Well, seeking your purpose.
No,
Sounds good.
Takes me back to my original question after you did your introduction, Hank. How
Yes.
do you find it?
Ah, very, very good.
Well, a second question came up.
Yes.
Are we using the right word?
Oh, that's interesting.
Well, if we agree on the same thing, the purpose.
Now, wait a minute. Before you go there,
Well, I just want to answer
words have meaning.
I know, but there is such a thing as getting lost in semantics. That's why I read that.
Not semantics.
That's why I read that. That's why I read that thing of Rumi's. Whatever he calls, I'm sure the word that he used was not English. It was something else.
Right.
yeah.
And,
But
and
Bob's
Mark,
trying to get us what's the spiritual concept behind the word that we use as purpose.
yeah.
And I think Bob's got something in it. What is it, Bob? You want to tell us?
Well, Dale taught me a long time ago that this whole thing about semantics is just nonsense. It's people arguing about stuff because words have meaning. Now, that's different than words have definition. Because if you take the definitions and you take the etymology, where the words came from, the history, how they developed, what was always behind any language, any word in any language is an image. And Alan talked about that, okay? We used to communicate with images. Now we're down at this lower level of words.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're doing, I'll just call it word study, the whole idea is to look at the word, the definitions, look at the definitions of all the words in the definition and their history, etymology, and on down the line, and put this package together until you get the concept that is beyond the words.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair
Did
enough.
I say that right there, Roger?
You did, my son. I would say to you all that my view of the spiritual expression of what is purpose is simply, what is it to which you direct your spiritual life force?
And guess what word is in the etymology?
What?
Intend.
Yeah.
And that's the point in the spiritual mechanism, right? That you direct from looking for what it is you want to then moving life force toward that want.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's intention. And that's what's in the etymology of purpose. So so what that tells me is we may be talking about the wrong subject. The subject should be, what's the one?
One?
What is the want? What is the thing that you have to come up with before you direct your life force?
You're thirsty?
Did I ask the question right?
Well,
Some yes.
it depends on whether it communicates. Sometimes a person has to repeat it back in order to see if they got it.
Go ahead.
You had asked, how does one find one's purpose? And I mean, even if that's a rhetorical question, what definition would you like to use to complete that sentence or complete that question?
Yeah.
If you feel it may be an incorrect word, I mean, there are other synonyms, goals.
Yeah.
There are also different levels. I mean, you could say that everybody's purpose is to reunite with God or to find their own divinity.
I can answer.
Rumi hints to that a little bit.
Yeah.
But here, in what we're talking about is here, in this body, in the time span we're allocated,
Hmm.
that was my idea of introducing it as a subject.
Yeah.
Saying,
Sure.
well, we're all here to find our own divinity and reunite with God, and that is so far above what people are. It's easy to say that, and it's also easy to dismiss it because
It's too big.
it's too big. Yeah.
I can answer your question. In the definition of purpose, it says the object toward which one strives. Means you're already moving, baby.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're already flowing life force in that direction, right here, planet life, this lifetime. So it's not the spiritual stuff. Okay, so and it's the same thing that Tom said that he was looking for, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, something has to happen before you start the movement. And that's what's your purpose, Tom? It has to happen. Once that happens, okay, you can call it purpose. You can call it setting a goal.
Sure.
You can call it, I want that fancy new car. Want, you see?
Yeah.
Then if you establish that want strong enough and clean enough without any counter intentions or cross intentions, now your intention to get that fancy new car is your purpose. Is that better?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Let me comment on that.
Good.
One can have intentions that are very powerful. Intentions to own an airplane and to own a canoe. An intention to go to Alaska. An intention to go to Hawaii. Um, and be powerful enough so that these things actually happen. You bring them about. It doesn't necessarily mean that this is your purpose. And this is a situation that I find myself in. I have a lot of fun. It's like, I mean, this planet is like, I feel like a puppy in a sausage factory, and I'm terribly interested in different kinds of music, and I have musical instruments, and the things that I want to do that are going to be hard to do, and somehow I ended up with an airplane again. At my age, I'm trying to fly this plane, and all, but these are not my purpose. And I think when I'm deciding how important something is, especially if it seems to be costing me too much, a good yardstick is how does it align with the one thing? The one thing.
You're on
I
with
see. So you're kind of talking about all those things are a purpose, but you're talking about the senior overriding purpose.
You could say that, yeah. I could call them goals or
Well, intention, goal, purpose, it's all kind of circles the same drain.
now you're saying it's semantic.
No, I
Yeah.
said it circles the same drain. I didn't say it all circles the same drain together. One's here, one's there, one's there, but it's sort of conceptually around the same thing. You put something out there, you flow life force towards it, and that's what you're doing. Okay. Now, whether you're buying a plane or you're trying to help others, you see. But I think I'm getting the sense that the purpose of the discussion today is about, according to what you put up, when you come into this life, you already have a purpose.
I think so, and I have to admit that's a belief.
Oh yeah. But I'm saying I got from what you read us to put up on the screen. That was the gist I got, and that's also part of a theory that I ran across. Whereas in between lives, we go meet with our spiritual counselor and determine what it is we want to work on in the next lifetime. And then, because you got all your powers at that point, and then you set it up and who you're going to run into and, who you're going to go to war with and who you're going to fall in love with and various types of things. You set it all up. And then you go through amnesia in order to come into into this into a body here on planet Earth, and then you live that out.
Yeah.
Now that would be a purpose that you come into life that maybe have multiple elements in it. Now that's
Fair.
that theory. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Fair.
But it does interestingly bring up the point that who says there's just one senior purpose?
Ah. Well.
And I just thought of that. So
Thank you. Well, thanks for sharing that. That's a good question. I'm treading on thin ice here because I like to feel that I don't have too many beliefs. I'm very practical and very realistic. But I think I do have that as a belief, that if you know what your purpose is, you can have all these other things.
Hank.
Because you can let me finish this. You can have all of these other things because you see them in perspective. They won't take over the main purpose.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to choose. And if you have to choose, you choose the thing that aligns most with your main purpose. It doesn't mean you give everything else up. You
Yeah.
can have lots of toys and lots of interests as long as you don't get lost, truly lost in them.
well, okay.
And David, you
Yeah,
wanted to,
David.
You remember Jim Marshall?
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Is he still around?
I don't know. I've been out of touch with him.
Oh, he wrote the book Septology, Advertising a Free Spirit, and I ordered it, and I love the book. He
Yeah.
said that a belief is the confession of ignorance.
Okay.
It means you don't know. It means you don't know. It means to accept something as true without proof.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this is an absolute, and this is Jim Marshall, and Jim Marshall likes to do lists of
Sevens.
what do you call it, of declarations.
Yeah, I love it, that book.
which is very nice for him. I mean, I know Jim. Yeah, I've interacted with him, and I like him, but yeah, you know, belief is very much a gray area, and I can't say that I have no proof that this is true, because I have found that since I've known my purpose,
Yeah.
I can be much happier. I'm much happier, and things align, and there is more synchronicity,
Mhm.
more serendipity.
Have you ever wondered why all that would be so, Hank? Because you're touching on a very important point there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you're
well, tell us
why?
about that point.
Yeah, why do you think it's so?
Well, actually, when you know what you're on about in life and what it is toward which you are moving all the time. I mean, my purpose has been with me long before the physical universe. So everything does align to where is it you directed your awareness, your attention, and all of your faculties. And things will either align with where you're going or where you directed your attention or not. I'll give you a little true story. When I was getting to know Virginia, which I've been sharing my life with for the last 22 years, I ran into this pretty young lady, 22 years younger than me. And, but I don't get involved in relationships unless we know what the hell we're doing together. And so I said to Virginia one day, I said, if you had all of the money, all of the resources, and all of the time to do whatever it is that you want to do, what would it be? She's one of the few people who actually had an instant answer, which made sense. Most people say, well, I want to travel and I want to, yep. She said, I want to heal people. And I suddenly looked at her and I said, this is a chick I could have a relationship with. And hence we are now together. Because,
Wonderful.
you know, it was that simple. finding out what is it you really, really, really want to do in life. I want to heal people, she said.
And you're,
It's like a straight, honest, pure answer.
Yeah, that's wonderful. It's a great story.
Mm.
I myself don't feel I can give anybody advice about finding a significant other.
As,
I've been, I've been, I,
as
I've
my
been,
female doctor said to me, and she's pretty, Roger, and I turned around and said, and that helps.
yeah, and well, I've been extremely lucky, luckier than I deserved, and
Okay, Norma, hanging
our,
by his petard here now, my dear.
our, you know, our first attraction was sex.
Oh, thank you for sharing that.
Well, it's true, damn it. I mean, I didn't know, how lucky I was, how neat you would be. I,
I
you
think
know,
that people recognize, we're given certain codes by
of
man.
course, there is a recognition. There's something drawn. Something drew me to you, and you to me, and my intellectual abilities or recognition or maturity had nothing to do with it. It's just like I was herded into this corral. It's like God said, I know what would be good for you, and kind of pushed me into the stockade, and it turned out to be I turned out to be very lucky, and we've been together for over 20 years, and I think I mean there are other areas in my life where I feel I was very successful, and thought I was very clever, and looking back on it, I realized I was very lucky. I have a son that I had a wonderful relationship with, and he was educated. I taught him to read. Um, I trusted him. He's been very responsible and a good friend. And I don't see other people having that kind of relationship with other children, including him with his children.
I need to go, folks. My sweetheart has been calling me now for dinner.
I've
Well,
been smelling that,
smell it out there. She's a great cook. She cooks weekends, and I cook during the week while she's at work.
That's,
What a
and
deal!
that's her secret.
Yeah,
Congratulations on that.
yeah, it's a real deal. So good meeting, Hank.
Okay, well,
Our time streams are so different, unfortunately.
thank you for your contributions.
Welcome, mate.
For your contribution. I mean, I'm not done with everybody yet,
Right.
but thanks for coming to the party, and we'll see you again soon.
Okay, Tiger. Next time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Keep smiling a lot.
So I'm gonna leap in here and put my 2 cents in, because I'm not the, well, anyway, as I look from the vantage point of being almost 75 this December, I think I've had one occupation. I've never managed to change occupations. It's just been something that resonated with being an artist and in service. And I think that the in service part has been very valuable. That's what I do. I help people, whether it's doing sessions or reading or getting a project out on time so that they can attend a conference with promotion materials, even though they come to me at the very last minute. And I think that when you have a goal of being in service or helping people, it doesn't matter what your profession is, because you can be in service in any kind of profession, whether it's fixing cars or building planes or being a gardener or whatever. So, and then as I get involved even more with the service part and the, I think I talked about it, opening up to love and being, it has the goal or another purpose has developed into, and I hope this doesn't sound like a Scientology, good God, to be raising the energy on the planet. And once you raise the energy and enough people get in there, it's just like enough people are being vegan or enough people are being vegetarian, all of a sudden it blossoms. So this is,
That's the 100th monkey.
yeah, right. So yeah, that's good.
Critical mass.
Critical mass, thank you, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great. Appreciate that. And hey, I see Ray is back on again. Ray, are you able to talk to us? 'Cause,
Ray?
yeah, Ray is an old timer. Ray has been around, and I'm sure he's got lots to share.
Who is it Mick?
No, Ray Palmer.
It's who, Mick?
Yeah, this is Mick is right here.
I switched headphones and computers. Can you hear me?
Yes, and you've got a camera on now too.
Yeah, I switched computers. I only have one camera. I have 5 computers. So I went ahead and switched.
Yeah. So.
But what, you haven't said anything.
Yeah.
Oh, you weren't listening.
I wasn't listening. Oh, I'm so sorry.
We have to meditate to hear him.
Oh, is that oh, you're the meditation man.
Oh, you were listening.
Of course I was listening.
Yeah.
I just didn't associate your picture and, with your speech.
Yeah.
I appreciated it very much. Thank you.
Yeah. To address for a moment again what Robert was saying about how do you find a purpose. That kind of an awareness, I think very few people really have it. When you find somebody like this, you can hold them up for an example. Most really great musicians you can assume they're on purpose, especially if they get old being accomplished musicians. I have just finished a biography of a guy named John Beeson, who is from my area. I became very interested in the plight of American Indians in Oregon and California, and they were basically exterminated. They were victims of a coordinated genocide. And this man lived here in the 1850s, and he tried to bring people around to give these people justice. They'd been here for 15,000 years, and they were rounded up in a matter of a few years, and very expensive wars were fought unnecessarily. And he had a lot to say about it. He was run out of town. He went back east and became acquainted with Abraham Lincoln and worked with a lot of people who were already into freeing slaves. But he never really accomplished his purpose. But he stuck with it. He stuck with it until he was so old that he had to be taken care of. And other families would have probably put him in an institution, but he never let go of that purpose. And that purpose was in retrospect, from where we sit, from where I sit, desperately necessary. It still is. So you look at someone like this, and this is a role model for me. How do you find out that this is right for you, or where what you need to address like that? And I think it's not terribly different from attaining the realization that you are immortal. I mean, what does it take to do that? I mean, for some people, it's years of meditation. For some people, it's an out-of-body experience. Or a near-death experience. Most people don't attain it. There are clues that you can give a person, like, what do you get most of your compliments for? Okay, and that's a clue. That's probably the best clue that I have found, is to ask a person, what do you get most of your compliments for? And you'll find that a lot of people who have a lot to give get these compliments and discount them, because they're not practical, or because it doesn't align with what their parents told them was important, or what their ministers told them were important. And so they just brush it off until they're in a position where they can actually put this together and have it sink in, both meanings of the word sink. It has to synchronize with what they're ready to hear. What do you get most of your compliments for? If anybody else has other processes or procedures that they can share with somebody to help them figure out what their purpose is for, and the meaning of the word, yes, Robert.
Well, I was sitting here listening, and I was going through, I established 4 major goals, purposes that I accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
But even though one of them was so massively important, so massive, that it's something that it extends over lifetimes, was cleaning up a mess, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think any of them would qualify as that the purpose.
Oh.
Then at the end of what you were saying, when you were saying, well, what do people compliment you for?
Mm-hmm.
The compliments I get is teacher.
Teacher, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's not an issue of, well, I teach physics, or I teach chemistry, or I teach Scientology, or knowledgeism, or I teach this, or I teach that. It's just that because the compliments come from all kinds of different directions when I'm informing, educating.
Thank you. Thank you.
So if I were to guess, that would be it.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, actually, because you're the one who helped me get there.
Does anyone know the difference between education and induction?
Yes.
Deduction?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Share that with us, if you would.
Education is what the main, what we're taught is to put knowledge in. Deduction is to pull knowledge out.
Yes. This exactly the Socratic.
There's a few schools like that around the world now.
Mm-hmm.
That the kids are completed whole university by 11 years old.
Fantastic.
That's also behind when I say I'm teaching, is I'm teaching in a way to help them pull out what it is they already know,
mm-hmm.
which is educe.
Yeah.
Reduction.
There's a word that's in the dictionary. It's barely ever used. It's called maieutic, the maieutic method. MAIEUTIC, maieutic method, and it's associated with Socrates' technique of teaching people by asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
And it's used by Sufis, and it's used by, well, this is what I try to do. In what we call auditing, that's basically what you're doing,
Yes, that's very true. The right form of auditing.
asking questions. I was so enamored of that word; it was so relevant that my first attempt at really organizing some kind of an institution was I called it the Maieutic Institute. And I still have some cards around here, and it went absolutely nowhere. It doesn't. The word doesn't resonate with people. You know, there are a handful of people that will listen to that and say, "Well, that's fascinating." You know, that's actually in the dictionary, right? What does it mean? Where does it come from? So I think you'll find maybe 5 people in 1,000 will have that response. The others will just kind of suddenly blank out for a moment.
Yeah, because I mean,
Another
Like
one in that family is illicit.
illicit, yes.
Oh, no, don't people know illicit?
No.
Okay.
I'm editing a book for Eric Woolery.
For who?
Eric Woolery.
Oh, yeah. You work with Eric Woolery, huh?
He was the master processor in ethnologism.
Yes.
And he got fired.
What?
Oh, I
He
don't
got
know.
fired from.
No, he didn't get fired.
No.
No, he could be controversial, but I mean, I never had the pleasure of talking to him
I
directly.
did. No
I've,
pleasure.
I've talked with
No
Alan.
pleasure.
No pleasure.
Yeah, that's neither here nor there. So
Yeah,
I'm wondering about how many people's purposes are set up by their willingness to take on huge jobs from something they've done in a past life. Like Beeson, I mean, that man was passionate and driven, and you wonder, what is he atoning for? That was my thought.
that's a fair question, and that is something that Hubbard himself would have said.
Who's the guy? Norma?
John Beeson.
Yeah, Beeson, the one that Hank talked about that was dedicated to the Indians and you know, trying to get justice for them, American Indians on the West Coast.
Yeah, and eventually throughout the country.
Mhm.
you know, that does bring up another question. If I may
Absolutely.
bring up another question, I know I brought up a few.
Yeah.
And that is one of the things that I ran across after I'd gotten to knowledgeism, and that was where I was now focused on processing and not learning Scientology for the business and all that. But I found out that I was operating under what Alan and Eric termed an involuntary replication.
Meaning what?
An involuntary replication is when you've had something, let's say in prior lifetimes, or universal, whatever, that you had this huge, giant purpose, goal, whatever, that you've put a massive amount of life force in, and it is this huge, huge, huge game, and something goes wrong. You miss something.
Yeah.
Misinterpreted something. Something goes wrong, and the whole thing crashes. And when all that life force that you've invested in it comes crashing back on you as a spirit, ouch.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So there's this drive to get back on that positive purpose and push it through, right?
Yeah.
Well, so then you go to another lifetime, and that thing, something in the left fires that thing up, and you put a lot of life force in it, but now you don't have as much life force. It's a smaller game, and you have no idea of the previous, so it crashes again. You can't accomplish it because as soon as you put power into it, it empowers the negative side of it that pushes back. I live this specifically like I just stated it.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I pushed to move forward with spiritual processing, auditing, whatever you want to call it, okay? There was this kickback every time, constantly. And so I'd stop for a while, and then I'd start again, and then this kickback. And it kind of got to the point where I could start it and then wait for the kickback. It took me 10 years to get through to the original event. And interestingly enough, Eric and I, in 1995, had gotten into this event, but I misinterpreted it. So 10 years later, after a lot of training and a whole lot of work and taking layers off the onion, right, I finally got through to the event. What happened then was I no longer had to do it. Which puts that wrinkle in when you have these certain drives, they don't always go smoothly because they could be an involuntary replication of something that went wrong before, and the more energy you put into getting it done, the more kickback you get.
Yeah.
That's the mechanics of it.
Oh, that sounds like a perfectly valid theory.
Well,
hold on.
Yeah.
Once I got to the original event and cleaned it up, I was free of it. I didn't have to do it. Now when I want to do it, and I put power into it, flow life force into it, I don't get the kickback.
I see.
That makes sense.
So the only theory about it would be maybe the model you use to explain it.
Yeah. It's very hard for me to completely grok it without knowing what the event was and what's the nature of the kickback. And I'd have to see more specifics. I mean, the sense of what you're saying, it does make sense. And so that's as much as I can get out of it with it, because I can't say I've had an identical experience to my knowledge.
Yeah.
I mean, I may have had it, may be effective it without really, knowing this. I do get feelings very often that there are certain things. In fact, the only thing I get charge on, in terms of case, I'm talking about my case now, the things that read on a meter, the things that I have to deal with that come up and make me uncomfortable, have to do with wide-ranging injustice, political injustice, and these things. And you can see a lot of examples. And as I hear about things, I watch what's going on with the Supreme Court. I watch what's going on in our government. And I think about things like leaders, the historic leaders that led their countries into disastrous situations. And if you were in that environment, there was nothing you could do about it because they had so much power. And it's just like, I find myself running a whole chain of these things. So I don't know whether this is because of something engrammic or just I see cause and effect. It's like you're watching somebody pouring sugar into his gas tank, to make his car run better. And your impulse is, no, don't do that. You're ruining your car. And they say, well, that's your opinion. You're aligned with the wrong people. Now, what do you do with that? I mean, all you can do is
you let them ruin their engine.
Yeah, you let them ruin their engine. Of course, if you're sharing the car, then you
better get a tap card so you can ride the bus.
Exactly. Well, I'll tell you what, I think we've gone as far as we can go with this right now. Does anyone else have a last thing that they would like to share with us on the subject?
Well,
Nick.
I didn't probably realize what my purpose is till my old age. But now I'm looking back and I see there's a um, series of events that fit perfectly together and they complement each other. They're in addition, they're in a series. Um, that it's to me, it's quite amazing to me myself. Um, I started wondering, questioning what was wrong with me when I was 15, uh, and I started reading books, whatever I could find in Dad's library, and then. When I left home, grew up in the country. There was no bookstores. I didn't know what stores were hardly. But when I got to the city, I learned about bookstores, and I had extreme knowledge hunger, and but looking back now, I see that I was actually developing my own version of Scientology, learning how to know, seeking the knowledge, and all this stuff, and. There was some incredible coincidences. My sister, I was suicidal in '85, and in despair, everything was failing, nothing was working, and my sister happened to, knows that I like to read books, so she happened to see a Dianetics book in a store. In a bookstore, and thought, well, that'd be a good present for David for Christmas. So she bought that, and she gave it to me. And I said, "Why are you buying me this thing for? I'm not interested in science. I want God to heal me." And I didn't even open the book. I did not open the book, but I kept it because it was my sister's present. And I moved, and I traveled a lot of miles, and I got rid of a lot of stuff, but I kept this book along the way. And in 1997. That's it, 11, 12 years later, I'm again at a very bad point. I'm ready to pack it in. And at 10 o'clock on Good Friday morning of 97, I think it was March 28th, and I'm crying. I'm very, very sick. And I said I was planning on what am I going to do, how I'm going to do it. I figured the best thing for me to do is run my pickup truck into a bridge post as fast as it would go. But I didn't want to. So I sat up on bed and I'm half crying and I said, God, I want my sanity back. And I fell asleep for about 10 minutes. I woke up and I figured, well, I'm going to go get something to eat. It's going to be my last supper. And on the way, I turned the TV on and I caught a Dianetics commercial in progress. And I had a great aversion to books by this time because I already read a few hundred and they were not getting me anywhere. I was sick from reading books. But I said, oh, this is interesting. And it said, the Dianetics commercial on the Learning Channel, it said, the source of all your emotional troubles, read page such and such of a book, Dianetics. I said, oh my God, not another book. But I went and I looked at my library and I found it. And longer story short, I began to read it. It was difficult at first. And I read, it took me about 3-4 tries into it, going 10, 20 pages and bogging down and going back to the beginning and getting into it. And then finally it started to flow. And I said, by the time I got to page 50 or so, I said, whoa, this is the first author that knows how the mind gets screwed up and how to unscrew it. And I kept on reading all day and all night and into the next day. And I said, I got to go and find more about this. I didn't know what Scientology was. I didn't know. I called.
And the rest is proverbial.
And I called the number on Saturday night, thinking I'm going to get a message machine, a voicemail, and somebody answered, and it was the Church of Scientology in Toronto, and asked for information on Dynetics, and he said, "You want to come in for a demo?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." So I came in on Sunday, and I long story short, the guy that was assigned to do the demo for me didn't show up, and thank God he did. He was terrible, but I got a good auditor, top-notch Dynetic auditor, and gave me a 2.5-hour session, and it saved my life.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that. And so I think that on that, we will probably wrap up about purpose. And thanks everybody for sharing their ideas about purpose and how to find your purpose and how to help other people find their purpose. A lot of us grow up assuming that our purpose is to survive. And if we go out to help people, we'll find that many of them assume their purpose is to survive, and perhaps their purpose is to survive. I never really had that purpose, which made me an enigma to my parents and to a lot of other people. But I have had to learn to talk to people whose purpose is to survive without talking down to them or being condescending, which is hard.
Dennis Stevens said that our purpose is to know.
Well, each person has their own purpose, and it's specific to that person. And that's what I've been going with, and that seems to work for me. So I'll post that thing on that Rumi quote, and see what we can do with it. And I want to thank you all for coming and participating at our party. I wish I could serve refreshments.
Yeah, I made some homemade ginger ale with orange and carrot for a barbecue last week here, and I got lots left over. So
okay, well, we can figure out a way to transport a little bit of it to each of us.
My neighbor was shouting through the window during the meeting. He said, "I want some of that," he says.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hey,
Thank you
Tom.
very much. Thanks, everybody.
Hey, Tom, you figured out what you want to do when you grow up?
Grow up. I'm 62 years old.
Oh my God, you look so young.
I'm thinking about retirement now. I'm working anyway.
All right.
Careful.
It's been
Okay.
fun.
See you now.
Bye.
Bye-bye.